In a courtroom in Florida, a spectacle. 3 hours of can't-look-away testimony from the man accused of murdering an apparently unarmed teenager over loud rap music in a car. Michael Dunn repeatedly tried to convince the jury that he acted in self-defense, while prosecutors repeatedly ripped into him as a cold-blooded killer. This is a case that touches the two classic American hot buttons of race and guns, and ABC's Ryan Owens has this report for our series, Crime and Punishment.
I'm looking out the window, and I said, "You're not going to kill me, you son of a bitch," and I shot.
In his own words and in riveting detail.
It wasn't just my life I was worried about, no.
Admitted killer Michael Dunn recreates for the jury the moments that led to the shooting death of 17-year-old Jordan Davis.
Do you notice any differences about your body physically?
I'm shaking. I'm quivering like a leaf.
Prosecutors call it cold-blooded murder. Dunn maintains it was self-defense. It started when Dunn and his fiancée Rhonda Rower pulled into a Jacksonville, Florida gas station in November 2012. They parked next to an SUV full of teens.
Body panels of the SUV were rattling. My rear view mirror was shaking. My eardrums were vibrating. This was ridiculously loud music.
Dunn's fiancée testified the 47-year-old software developer had this reaction.
And what did the defendant say?
Oh, I hate that thug music.
Rower went inside the store to buy a bottle of wine. Seconds later, gunshots.
Oh my God, somebody's shooting. Somebody is shooting out of their car.
Dunn pulled his semi-automatic pistol out of the glove box and fired 10 times. Today, he testified while she was in the store, he talked to the young men in that SUV.
I said, "Can you turn that down, please?" They turned it off. And if the music wasn't off, at least the bass stopped completely.
Okay. And at that point, what did you then say?
I said, "Thank you."
Dunn says the pleasantries didn't last long. And with Jordan Davis's parents looking on, he told the jury the 17-year-old in the rear passenger seat started mouthing off.
I should kill that here. I should kill that. Now he's screaming.
Okay.
There's no mistake of what he said. That is what he said.
Today, Dunn tried to convince the jury Jordan Davis was a foul-mouthed, shotgun-toting teen who actually pointed a gun at him.
You said it looked like a barrel of a gun or a shotgun?
It was a thick enough profile. It was, to my eye, a 12 gauge, maybe 20. When he says, "Yeah, I'm going to kill you," I look, and I'm looking at a barrel. He's showing me a gun, and he's threatening me. But after he opened the door, then he looked at me and said, "You're dead."
At that point, what did you believe was about to happen to you?
I thought I was going to be killed.
That was only one of the buzzwords Dunn used to try to convince this jury the shooting was self-defense. He seemed to hit them all.
I was still fighting for my life. I knew I had done nothing wrong. I have every right of self-defense, and I took it.
But prosecutor John Guy would have none of it.
Jordan Davis was never a threat to you, was he, Mr. Dunn?
Absolutely he was.
As soon as his cross-examination began, we were reminded why defense attorneys cringe when their clients take the stand.
I don't want to call it an act of desperation, but they really had no choice. Without his testimony, there was no evidence of self-defense. All you had was a man shooting 9 times into a car with a bunch of teenagers. He would easily be convicted, so he had to get on the stand. He had to explain why he fled the scene and why he didn't call 911.
You were being disrespected by a mouthy teenager, weren't you?
No, I was being threatened. Threatening to kill somebody isn't a disrespect. That is just crazy.
Prosecutor Guy reminded the jury found in the teen's SUV and grilled Dunn on every inconsistency, including the fact his own fiancée said he never mentioned a gun the night this happened.
You did not tell her during that 3 miles anyone pointed any weapon at you, did you?
I think I did. I think I was very clear that they threatened my life.
My question was, did you tell her a weapon of any kind?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Dunn, the truth is, you never told the love of your life that those boys had a gun.
You weren't there.
All right, ma'am, if you'll come right around here.
Later, prosecutors called the fiancé back to the stand to hammer home the point.
When you came out of the car,
Yes.
did the defendant ever back in the hotel room, Ms. Rauer, that same night? Did the defendant ever tell you that he saw the boys with a firearm?
No.
Did he ever tell you that he saw the boys with a weapon?
No.
Dunn claims his fiancée got something else wrong, too. The last words she said she heard him say before the shooting.
I hate that thug music.
You don't recall saying, I hate that thug music?
No, if I would have said anything, I would have called it rap crap. Thug music isn't a term I would use.
The prosecution spent a lot of time quizzing Dunn about his behavior after the shooting.
Mr. Dunn, the reason you left the gas station is because you knew you had into a car of 4 unarmed teenagers.
That's incorrect.
Dunn acknowledges he and Rauer fled the scene of the shooting and never called police. Instead, they returned to this hotel and ordered pizza and made some cocktails.
I didn't call the police until the following morning.
You called the pizza man.
Dunn said he didn't realize anyone had been killed late that night when he used his cell phone to search for information about the shooting.
I ran to the bathroom.
Tell the jury why you ran to the bathroom.
I vomited.
Okay.
But he still didn't call police and instead drove home to Central Florida, where he was ultimately arrested.
It wasn't going to change it from self-defense to anything else.
Dunn was on the stand for more than 3 hours, and he was the defense's final witness.
Go ahead, Mr. Dunn. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the defense has now arrested Derek.
By late tomorrow, the jury should begin deliberating his fate. Prosecutors want first-degree murder, but many observers think that's a stretch.
They've lost credibility by doing that. This is not a case of premeditated murder. He didn't know these kids ahead of time. He didn't go to the gas station in order to shoot them. They love to overcharge because it frightens defendants. It hurts them in trying to get out on bail. It sends the message to the public that this is really a vicious crime. But when they get to the trial, can they really prove it?
That will be up to 12 jurors who will have Michael Dunn's own words still fresh in their minds.
I thought I was going to be killed.
I'm Ryan Owens for Nightline in
Well, Roy Black turned out to be wrong, Dwane Case. What was your take on this trial? And let me put you in the position of being the defense attorney for Mr. Dunn. What would you have done differently, if anything?
Well, I don't know what you could have done differently. I mean, you need a magic wand to win that case. You know, the only way you win that case is if there's testimony that the kids had a gun. If they'd have found a gun on the kids, or evidence of a gun, or somebody that had seen them with a gun earlier, or something that had to do with the gun, you have a chance of winning. But when you in order to have self-defense, the force used has to be proportional. Meaning, you know, if somebody threatens to punch you, you can't shoot them. Okay? You know, you can punch them back, but you can't shoot them in self-defense. You know, and he had to feel he was his life was threatened, and if there was no gun, you know, those kids can yell threats at him all he wants, and if there's no gun, he can't just shoot them for making threats. And you know, and then his actions afterwards, you know, make it extremely difficult. I mean, you know, most people that act in self-defense, you know, at some point call the police. I mean, I've tried a couple self-defense cases, and one of them, and sometimes though the people are so scared, you know, that they shoot or stab or do whatever they do, and then they run off because they're afraid the person's still going to come after them. So, you know, it's one of those, you know, it's one of those deals. But that's an extremely difficult case to win.
And Susan, body language that you are, when you saw or heard Mr. Dunn testify, what did you make out of him? Being deceptive?
Well, he was being deceptive, but I think that his demeanor really spoke more words. And I've worked several cases like this. I have one that I'm working on right now where it's a first-degree murder case, and you know, I just know that we are not putting this defendant on the stand, and I know that that's probably the only way to get an acquittal, if possible, to explain the person's actions. But there are times where the demeanor of the defendant is so offensive, and not sincere and believable, that he's going to just kill the case. And when the jury is looking at, just his voice, his tone of his voice, and his facial expressions, he just comes across like a cynical, pessimistic, judgmental asshole. That's how he comes across. And that's what the jury...
In plain English.
Oh, I can't say that word?
No, I said in plain English.
He's just not a likable guy. And I don't think that the jury didn't believe him because he was, there's a lot of evidence stacked up against him, but I wouldn't have put him on the stand.
Do you think, Dwane?
Yeah, but they had to because they had no other evidence of self-defense. I mean, that's a case. It's kind of like the Jodi Arias case. Self-defense probably wasn't correct. If they would have went for manslaughter or second-degree murder, heat of passion, something like that, they probably would have won. And it's the same thing. If they'd have done something where they provoked a fight and it wasn't premeditated and it was a heat of passion, they may have got a second-degree verdict out of it.
Yeah.
And, but sometimes, sometimes they go all or nothing, and and it's risky.
Right, and you know what? Don't you believe too? It really has a lot to do with witness preparation. I mean, it's just I don't. I with my clients a lot. I want to see how they're responding, and there's a really cool program that's coming out. I can't talk about it right now, but it's analyzing what people's impressions are of both the state or the defense, if they're very likable, and also to the witness. And that kind of gives you kind of a head start about, what's their impression of that person? Because if they don't like them, they're going to hang on to that.
Absolutely. My undergraduate degree was in persuasion, and you're way more likely to be persuaded by somebody that you like than somebody you don't like. I mean, it's a huge factor. And if they don't like your client in a criminal case, you are in serious trouble. And sometimes you have people that are really hard to like. I don't do so much witness preparation as I do spending time I don't prepare them for what to say, how to say it on the stand, but I do talk to them a great deal and ask them questions, and I play devil's advocate a lot and talk a lot about what's wrong with their case and listen to their explanations and how they explain it. And I by the time we come to trial, I have a pretty good idea how they're going to, act and react on the stand. And one of the worst things I hate people saying is, "Oh, I'll be way different when I get on the stand," because they're not. They never are. They're the same as they're going to be, and they're going to be worse because it's stress and it's pressure and the last thing and if I put my client on the stand, it's a Hail Mary last resort. I don't think I can win.
Yeah. And
that's the only reason I put them up. Or I've got a client that's so good that I trust so much that I believe in so much that I just know that they'll be able to win the jury over.
The client's got to be like a lawyer himself, basically, right?
Well, and that's the client I had the Dateline show tomorrow night. My client was a lawyer. He was also a SWAT officer. And you want to talk about a nerve-wracking trial? Try trying a trial when your client's a lawyer and all his friends are some of the best trial lawyers in California, and they come and watch trial every day. And then after trial every day, you spend 3 hours critiquing what happened in court.
Yeah.
But they thought that everybody thought that it. I mean, nobody thought that I lost that trial. Nobody figured there was going to be a conviction in that case. And,
unbelievable.
And the jury just got it wrong.
Next story is the no indictment for Eric Gardner.
Okay, so the breaking news for the moment is that the officer accused in the chokehold death of Eric Garner in New York City is not going to be indicted by a grand jury. The decision has already been made. This is just a couple minutes ago. And if you're feeling deja vu again, of course, this has some of the similar underpinnings of the situation in Ferguson with Officer Darren Wilson and Mike Brown. and Darren Wilson obviously walked. He has since resigned from the police department, but the protests are still ongoing, and obviously we haven't heard the last of that. And then to put this New York situation, it's interesting. This literally happened about 10 minutes ago from when we're taping this. And just on a quick scroll of Twitter, I'm seeing something that you almost never see anymore, which is actually bipartisan. I'm seeing people on the left and people on the right. I'm seeing liberals and conservatives all kind of going, maybe we didn't agree on the Ferguson one. Maybe some of the facts we didn't all agree on, or the eyewitness testimony or what happened with Mike Brown and Officer Wilson. But this one seems a lot more straightforward. The chokehold, there's obviously video of it. The arrest, which was maybe for selling illegal cigarettes or something. There's a lot of people saying that these are different cases, that even the people, mostly on the right, who are saying that Darren Wilson getting off and not being indicted in that case was okay. There's more people already, and again, this is only in a couple of minutes, that are already saying that something is not right here. They say bad things happen in threes. So we just had, regardless of whether Darren Wilson should have been indicted or not, an innocent person died, you know what I mean? Or someone that should not have died, even if he had done something criminal. Someone that should not have been murdered died. Now we have it again, just, 2 weeks after, or a week and a half after the decision on that one. These are the types of things, as I said, they say things happen in threes. Like, we got one more of these things. We're starting to get to critical mass with this. A lot of people wanted to believe that we were post-racial after Obama was elected. Obviously, that's not the case. I don't know that ever is really the case ever, anywhere. People have old hatreds. People, things don't change as quickly. They change quick often, but not as quickly as Anyway, so this story just broke. I hope, again, calmer heads will prevail and that everyone's going to be okay, and we'll wait out to see what happens next.
Dwane, I want to start with you. Was this a surprise, especially the one in New York City, given that they had low-grade video evidence and this was an illegal chokehold? Grand juries,
but it wasn't an illegal chokehold. He was under the arm on one side. That was a hold that they're trained to use, and the chokehold didn't kill him. It was when he was on the ground that what the officers did to him on the ground is what's killed him. The guy the reporter that just did that story pisses me off. Okay, here he is using terms that are intended to incite people, and then at the end he goes, "Boy, I hope cooler heads prevail." He should never have been murdered. This cop murdered somebody, but I hope cooler heads prevail. I mean, that's what's wrong. Okay. What the cops did to the man was wrong. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a big fan of the police. Okay, I spend my life, fighting with catching police lying, cheating, and stealing and doing things wrong. That's my job. That's my job description. I police the police. Okay, I make sure they don't violate people's constitutional rights. That's what I do. But you know what? Nobody's talking about responsibility on everybody's side. If the man had just said, "Cool, man, let's go to court. I'll whip your ass in court," and he'd be alive. Okay. Now they didn't need 6 cops to take this guy down. Of course, if it had been me, I'm 5'4", 170 pounds. Okay, they probably wouldn't have brought 5 cops because I'm not 6'4", 350 pounds. Okay, but it's just people resist, and these things happen. The guy wasn't healthy to begin with, okay, and it's half there's a lot of blame to go along with everybody, but for God's sakes, let's don't incite riots, let's don't whip the people into a frenzy, okay, because it's not going to do any good. The police are necessary. We need the police. Without the police, I don't have a job. They're not out there arresting people. Of course, my family's out on the street too, so I really want the police out there, taking care of the bad guys. But they have to make split-second calls all the time, and there's a lot of cops that go home in boxes. Okay, and I don't want their job. I would never want to do their job. They're dealing with people that are fighting against them every day, all day long. And And sometimes they cross the line, sometimes they make a mistake. I don't think it had anything to do with the man being black. I don't think it had anything to do with that.
And Susan, if this was somebody else and not a cop, do you think they would have been indicted, A, and B, overall, what's your opinion on the 2 no indictments?
Well, I have to agree that I don't think that this was a racial issue, and my, I get really irritated when the first thing it jumps out is it's got to be a racial issue, and I just see a cop that had, like what you're talking about, had to make a split-second decision, and he felt that this guy was much bigger than he was, and he had his arms inside the car. He was in there trying to kind of fend the guy off. He couldn't get him off him, and his split-second decision was, heck, this is serious. And then he grabbed his gun and he shot him. So, I mean, what do you expect him to do when he carries a gun, he has the authority to do that. And even watching his video, when I watched him talk about the incident, he came across as a very sincere person. He was not deceptive. He was telling it sincerely what happened. And
Mr. Wilson.
Yeah,
exactly. You did see that video. What did you detect when you saw that interview? I thought he was being straightforward, too.
I thought he was very straightforward. He was very sincere. His responses were thoughtful. There wasn't hesitation or pausing. His terminology he used was very consistent. I know he was being chastised for using words like correct, but that's police talk, So, I mean, there's nothing deceptive in that. What would be deceptive is he would use no and then correct and using 2 different verb tenses. So then those are things that I would be looking for. But no, I just get really irritated when the first thing is you get Sharpton out there and everybody else that this is a racial thing. And, I didn't see it that way. I didn't see it that way.
What about Dwane? Did you see about that 12-year-old kid who got shot, who was by the park, allegedly had a fake pistol? Maybe he was pointing it. I don't know the exact story. Did you see, and they're waiting for an indictment on that on Cleveland? And if so, what's your thoughts on that?
the kid took the orange tip off a toy gun so that the gun would look real. Okay? And I'm sorry, but you point a gun at a cop, you're going to get shot. I mean, we need to teach our children that, that cops carry guns and they will kill you if you threaten them. Okay? I mean, it should be like, they should be, you should treat cops like rattlesnakes, man. I mean, give them a wide berth and a lot of respect and you won't get bit. And I mean, it's that simple. And if the cops are going to harass you, then there are channels for dealing with that, but wrestling with a cop or pointing a toy gun at a cop or bad mouthing a cop, I mean, is never a good idea. It's just not. What we need to teach our children when the cops start to hassle them, they need to learn to say, I'm not going to answer any questions without my lawyer being present, and I want a lawyer before we go any further. Okay, and that will stop the cops from doing a lot of things. It's way more effective than trying to grab their gun.
And these riots that are out of control, they have to stop for sure. In Ferguson, Susan, you would agree, right?
Yes. We're talking about that the riots need to stop?
Oh, these riots, they're horrible in St. Louis.
Oh, they are horrible. Listen, I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, outside of Detroit, and if you remember when Martin Luther King was killed, I lived in that era where there were riots ongoing and lots of racial riots. And I got to tell you, living that, is left a real impression with me for the rest of my life. And it doesn't solve anything. And I'll never forget, as a kid growing up, going down to one of the local parks and a whole gang of kids attacked my brother. And I got to tell you something, it was really pretty cool because it was a black gang. But once I escaped, my brother got the crap beat out of him. But one of the neighbors, a black man, came running out down to the park with a baseball bat because he didn't tolerate Now those were thugs. But they, you know what I'm saying? I mean, just,
Yeah.
They're just different mindsets.
No question about it. This next story is a little bit sad, and I want to get your guys' opinions on it on the other side.
Well, first of all, a lot of Northerners or Yankees may not even know what a switch is. This is a switch. I brought this to show if you're not just black kids, white kids know what a switch is. Your grandma tells you, you go get me a switch, and you pull this twig off of a tree, and they hit you on the legs with it. And whether it's right or wrong, I think people need to understand this is a part of Southern culture. If you look at the polling data, a majority of all Americans, a majority of white Americans agree with corporal punishment. A majority of Southerners agree, Midwesterners too. This is something that goes on. On the cosmopolitan coasts, this is shocking to people. But there's paddling, there's whipping with belts, there's switching with switches, there's spanking, and this is something that we need to have a debate about. I would say to anybody, because I was corporally punished, kids today, you don't have to do that. Just take their iPod from them. Take their iPad. That's enough. You don't have to do all that stuff anymore.
Right.
But you need to understand this is something that is a major a part of especially Southern culture. And to say that this guy is a complete lunatic, he took it too far, but it does happen.
Okay, Dr. Taylor, go ahead. But this is a mistake also to characterize it as a black issue. The reality is spanking is an ineffective way to discipline children. And what happens is, yes, you may create fear, but if you keep spanking them, you will always create a lack of respect. And when you have a teenager who does not fear you nor respect you as they grow up, then you have a problem.
Dr. Taylor, everything you're saying makes sense, except that there are statistics, as Van was just saying, that 80% of preschool children in this country, 80% have been spanked. So not all of them are growing up to be aggressive or to have mood disorders or any of the things that we've heard come from spanking.
But spanking in and of itself is ineffective as discipline. But we're not talking, we're talking about abuse that leads to mood disorders and being. And some parents do not know the difference between picking up an object to discipline or spank your child versus a firm pat or removing their hand. When you pick up objects, that's abuse. When you intend and want to inflict harm or pain to teach your child, that is abuse.
Very quickly, Judge, do you think that there is a cultural divide here, north, south, black, white?
I think that it's generational, Allison. I think people do what they have learned. I think they do what they have learned. I don't think it's necessary. I know white families who have been in my courtroom. I know rich families. I know poor families. My point is, I think it's whatever you have been taught is what you continue to do.
Great point.
But let me say this.
The numbers
it's very important.
Let me just point out that the polling data is very clear that the majority of all racial groups in this country believe in corporal punishment. African Americans are about 5 to 6 points higher. But so it's not just a black issue, it's an American issue. We need to deal with it that way.
And that was exactly the point I wanted to make. But let me just say, and I think that Doc, who I love and know, I think that this is sorry that this has come to this, but I think it's a moment in this nation that we've got to have this conversation. And you can't discipline a child when you're angry. I've said that to thousands of parents. Do not discipline when you're angry.
All right.
Okay, Susan, I want to go to you first. What do you think about this whole discipline and then them using the excuse, this is how we were grown up, etc.? That story with Adrian Peterson, of course, made national headlines in this year, 2014. What's your thoughts?
Well, I do agree with it being generational because I know my mom used to whoop my butt, when I was a kid. The belt, whoop, I remember for days. But I'll tell you the one thing that left more of an impression on me was that I couldn't go roller skating on Saturday nights, which was my favorite time to go. So when she took that away, life ended, just like the iPad. But, moving forward now here, fortunately, I haven't had any reason to have to spank my kids. But I'll tell you what, they've ticked me off many times that I wanted to spank them. But I found myself that taking away something that is the most important thing to them, it's almost like Lent. What do they need to take away and live without for a while?
Right, an iPad or something.
But I'm not going to chastise a parent that wants to whack their kid on the butt every now and then because sometimes the kid needs it. You know, but the problem is that we've got like this guy that was the judge. I don't remember who he was. That
Absolutely. Dwayne, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I mean, my dad's 87 years old, and I'm still a little afraid of him. You know, I don't know that I would challenge him today. And I think he spanked me once, you know, because I think it's more about, you know, you should never, ever, ever, ever injure your child with physicality. But I think that your children need to be a little bit afraid of you, okay? Especially boys. I think if boys aren't a little bit afraid of their dad, then you're going to have problems. And I think there's a time in almost every boy's life when he physically challenges his father, okay? I challenged my father. My son challenged me. Nobody ever got hurt. Nobody ever left marks, you know, but there was some wrestling and tussling and you know and they just you know I don't know if you know I didn't grow up where I grew up where we kept score and there was competition and you know and you tried to win. You know, I didn't grow up in the thing where nobody keeps score and everybody gets a trophy. You know, and I think that you know it's just part of life. It's part of the you know the old dog, the young dog challenges the old dog at times, but you know, I think corporal punishment is okay if it's done correctly, you know, but I don't know that, you know, I don't think that child should never, ever, ever be injured from it, you know, with marks or bruises or anything like that, so.
Yes, and you agree with that, too?
yes, but I don't believe in corporal punishment, but I'm not opposed to punishing your kids. I think that you made a very good point when it talks about, you know, the dad, the son dynamic. I think that makes more sense. But when you've got a father that might be disciplining their children, I don't think that that's probably a good way. It's setting the precedent. It's okay for men to hit women, and that's never okay under any circumstances. So I think if the child's going to be spanked, it should be something that maybe mom needs to do rather than dad, just because they have
absolutely. I'd never spank it. I would never spank a female child ever.
Yeah,
under any circumstance.
Listen, I know my ex-husband had a tough time with his son, and they've gone, you know, they've squared off a couple of times, and that was enough for them to say, hey, you know, cool it. You know where your boundaries are because, you know. It's just the testosterone that's going on here, and you got to tell your kid. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It is, and the kid has just got to understand, you know, and you got to get to them when they're young enough before they grow up and get too big and strong. Okay, you know, or take 4 years of wrestling or something. You know, you've got to. You know, you've got to impress upon them that they just need to have that little thing in the back of their mind that says, "Man, I really don't want to mess with the old man." You know.
Right. But you know, here's the problem though. Here's where it's very difficult. Is that you know, kids today, what they're taught in school that you know parents are never supposed to spank them, hit them. I mean, these kids today, you touch me, I'm calling the police or I'm calling DCF. You know?
Yeah, my stepson said that, and I pulled him aside in the corner, and I said, I'm a criminal defense attorney. If the police show up, I know what to say, and if the police show up here, you're going to jail. So here's the phone. Dial it.
Unbelievable. You know, I had Richard Herman and Tom Mesereau both separately, and I told them both, Dwayne, about your statement that they shouldn't have retried Jody because of the 4 holdouts. There wasn't just one. And Tom Mesereau instrumentally agreed with you wholeheartedly, as did Richard Herman. Talk a little bit about that and what you were telling me, that just the fact that there were 4, that Mr. Martinez should have just let it be.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Killing people for killing people makes absolutely no sense, number one. Number 2, the death penalty is more about vengeance than it is about justice. Okay? I mean, that's all it's about is vengeance. Okay? And there are angry people that want to see somebody die. Okay, well, the jury sat through the whole trial, every day of it. The prosecution won probably almost every day of that 6-month trial. I mean, the prosecution kicked the defense up one side and down the other in that trial, and it wasn't hard because Jody gave him tons of ammunition to do it with. Okay, and after all that, the best they could get is 8-4, for death penalty. So if there was one goofball holdout, then you retry it, But there was 4, okay, and there's so much prosecutorial misconduct coming out in that case right now. that Judge Stevens should throw the death penalty out. I mean, there's going to be, they're going to keep it. This is the Appeal Lawyers Full Employment Act. I mean, this thing's going to be in the Court of Appeals for 20 years, and there's going to be hundreds of decisions come out of this thing.
And Susan, your thoughts? Mr. Tom Israel thought that the prosecutor might have had ego, getting autographs, whatnot. That's why he decided to retry it. In some people's opinion, Richard, also Mr. Herman, what is your thoughts on retrying Jody again? I think it's still in progress. Not getting the exposure of the first trial, obviously, but definitely still in trial. What's your thoughts?
Well, when you're thinking about just the cost of it all, I mean, I think that the state would really need to really consider, like, I think there's only, two people that ever been on two women ever on the death penalty there in Arizona. I mean, the statistics are against them getting the death penalty, number one. Number two is, and this is just my own personal opinion, and most people out there don't realize how much money it costs to keep somebody on death row versus just giving them life. For Jody, life is not going outside those bars and looking into the real world and seeing sunlight again. That's really death to her. So, when I'm looking at the whole dynamic, and then there has been several prosecutorial, issues here, and it's, some real serious issues with jurors. I can't see how this thing is not going to get thrown out at some point in time, or the state's got to drop it or something. I just don't see it going all the way, and I don't see her getting the death penalty. I just don't. I cannot.
Even if she gets the death penalty, she will never be put to death.
I agree.
Too many appeal issues.
So when you talk about whether it's ego or not, I think that it's a combination of ego, and he feels he's got to go ahead and do it because he's got to, have justice for the family. Just take them through, just kind of with the Trayvon Martin case here. I mean, the state never really wanted to try it, but this is a little bit different case, but they did it anyway, so they just had the trial. They had to. And the family
and I think this is victim.
I
think this is victim driven also. I think Juan Martinez really wants to do it. But I also think that, it's victim driven, but if you got a good prosecutor, they can sit them people down and talk the victims through, putting an end to this thing, But now the victims are whipped into a deal where to not get the death penalty is to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's going to be, and you know what, the victims are never going to win. Until they have some sort of forgiveness in their heart for what happened or whatever, I mean, they're never going to win. They're never going to feel good about this.
Never.
And think about this: the death penalty. She gets the death penalty. Okay, her. There's going to be dozens of last-minute reprieves for her. So the victims are all on their edge, waiting to go watch Jody get executed, and boom, and then it's postponed for another 3 months, and I mean, it's a bigger nightmare for the victims than it is anybody else.
And Susan, I remember last year we spoke about this, and you said that Travis wasn't a perfect angel, right? In your opinion, he didn't deserve to die, obviously, but the fact that he kept getting his booty call. Aphrodite Jones also said that to me, that she was so mentally fucked up that, from being deceived by, what's your opinion? What were you telling me? In terms
I agree with you. When I think of Travis, he was not a perfect angel. I mean, he played right into the whole sexual fantasy stuff. He loved it. He used her. She let him use herself. I mean, it was just a very toxic sexual relationship, and he was, intoxicated by it. He was a kind of guy that, was told that he couldn't have sex until he got married. And I think when you tell people they can't do something until they're married, it just increases those cravings that much more. And he was intoxicated by her. And she knew that she was the one that kind of held on to that secret, like potion, and she used it, and she knew exactly how she'd be able to get his attention. So, but at the same time, I mean, he did say something. We heard it. It wasn't just, that's how I feel. I mean, I've heard the videos myself, the things that he called her. So, I mean, he had a very depraved mind, and so I think that he just drove her nuts. She was the wrong personality. She had a very addictive personality, and she was very what do I call, passive aggressive, and you got to a certain point where she was very jealous, and she just cracked, and she just was. If nobody can have him, I mean, if he wants that girl, I'm going to make sure that he is not going on that trip, and I'm going to do everything to make sure that doesn't happen. So,
yeah, and that's second-degree murder, and that's what they should have went with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay,
I had a custody evaluator once tell me that tens very rarely hook up with ones, meaning if one of them's really screwed up, they're probably both screwed up.
Yeah. Very good point.
No question about it. Very big trial that happened this year. Oscar Pistorius. Let's listen to this, and we'll go on the other side.
In the court affidavit signed on February 19, 2013, Pistorius said he was watching television in bed while Reva Steenkamp practiced yoga after a quiet dinner together.